today. My name is Mr. Kirk. I teach in the General Education Department. We do something different every year for Constitution Day, but it's federally mandated, and we recognize this. This is one of the best turnouts I've ever seen, so I want to thank you all for coming. It's a fantastic opportunity for you and for us to share something with you. First of all, I want to do a quick little survey. I want you to tell me if it's A or B. We the people. Does that come from A, the Declaration of Independence, or B, our Constitution? The term we the people. Those who think it's A comes from the Declaration of Independence, please raise your hand. Those who think it's B from our Constitution, raise your hand. Excellent. Constitution people are correct. The reason I mention that is up until the last few months, I'd never seen a We the People tattoo. Since July 1st, I've now seen 2 of them. And our speaker will not be showing this today, but in the publicity material you might have noticed, he has We the People written on his arm in a tattoo. It's a fascinating way for him to comment on who he is and what he believes in. Figuring out how to celebrate and recognize Constitution Day is always tricky. How do we do this? In the past, we've had little skits, we've had trivia games, we've shown videos. And today we're going to take a unique perspective of how one service member decided to defend the Constitution. So I'll get that to you in a few minutes. But I want to go over a couple simple facts for you so you're aware of where we are in history and perspective. Because we lose touch with things, I think, sometimes. So you have to think of when the Constitution was ratified. That means accepted and put into law. We think of 1776 as the date of our birth of our country, but it took a couple years later until the Constitution was ratified. Simple math tells me that's 11 years, and I don't even teach math. But that was 230 years ago. None of us, of course, is alive, but yet the Constitution remains, and our country remains because of that. So let's take a comparative look real quick. There were 13 colonies. You heard about those throughout your high school and grade school education. People are aware of that fact. Ohio was not even a state yet. Who are our fine residents from the state of Ohio? Okay, not many. Interesting. Sadly enough, they had 0 Super Bowls then, too. Yeah! Woo! But let's compare life in 1787 versus 2017. It's a nice round number at this point. We can compare some things. Population of the U.S. was just over 3 million. Now we're at over 300 million. It's an incredible growth and prosperity that I don't think our founding forefathers even envisioned. So that's kind of something to consider. Life back then was rural. It was farming. I know we have some people from farms here who grew up on farms, but the majority of American life is city living and different perspective as things have changed. U.S. budget was just about $5 million back then. Now we're up to $3.9 trillion. That's a lot of money, all right? And we're spending it very wisely in Congress, I've heard. Computers, of course, 0. Now we have a world of over 1 billion computers. So that just shows you how much things have changed. And you're probably aware of that. This isn't rocket science to you, but I want to put it in a perspective of how long ago that was. Here's the important part. Our Constitution is the shortest written one on the planet. It's not very complex, yet it stood the test of time. It's the longest standing Constitution of major governments around the world. So what they came up with works. And the beauty of it is its flexibility. It can be changed as we move forward, as we develop, as we grow as a people, as we hope to become better. Question is, will you be here in the year 2247? No, not one of us will be. So think about the people who first heard about the Constitution, read of it in the newspapers, thought about the law of the land. They just had to live within their lifestyle, 60 years, 50 years. They never envisioned what we would become. So it's very interesting to think of, if we double it, if the nation continues to evolve, where will we be? None of us will be alive, but life for people will be totally different by then. But those laws, those words that make us who we are, will remain. And that's the power of the Constitution. The fact that every time it's been put to the test, it has stood up. We can't ever forget that. It's what keeps us legal, it keeps us free, and it's a great country we've become. So, but the big question is, will America even remain in 230 years? We certainly hope so, right? Without a doubt, we don't want to go to our graves knowing that our country will continue in 230 years. Sorry that the Browns won't have a Super Bowl victory by then. Most likely, that's not going to happen. We can topple a king, we can't make the Browns a champion. Okay, so how are we going to wrap this around the Constitution today? Now, as we met our speaker, we were talking to him about what it means to be of service and what does it mean to dedicate your time. And I realized he took an oath to defend the Constitution. All United States Armed Forces members take an oath of enlistment. And when people give an oath, they mean it. They say those words, and they take them to heart. Now, first of all, what's an oath? Right? It's interesting. It's a word you hear all the time. Is a marriage vow an oath? Is a promise to pay your bills on time an oath? They're strong words. According to dictionary.com, it's a solemn promise. That's powerful. It's solemn. It's deep. It's personal. It's spiritual. Often invoking a divine witness regarding one's future action or behavior. This is the big part. We don't know the future. When you take the oath of marriage, you have no idea where it's going to go. When a service member signs up under the oath of enlistment, they have no idea if we're in peacetime or wartime at the end of it. Right? And really powerful words that bind them to the Constitution of the United States. Also, I thought some interesting words that came up were vow, pledge, and promise, which you are probably familiar with. So it continues. I do solemnly swear, I can't read this, I'm not taking a vow, I'll let you read it privately. Right? But it says right there, to defend the Constitution of the United States. It's fascinating. They're willing to stand and put their life and their freedom and liberty on the line to make sure the Constitution is upheld by all of us. Right? Here's the part that strikes me as most interesting. Against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Domestic means us. Right? And I want to say, I lay in my bed, head to bed every night, safe in the knowledge that if I did something really stupid and I tried to hurt this country, that my cousin, Jason, will take my life away if he has to. And I'm fine with that. Because that means that they truly believe those words. Doesn't matter who the enemy is. If the enemy is an American, and I have some crazy ambition to blow up the White House, my cousin will take me out. That's powerful. Because it's easy to defend against the foreigners, right? To protect our country. But those of us who might be seeking harm, powerful words. So the rest of it goes on. I'll let you read that. As I said, I can't take that vow. I'm going to be held accountable. Right? I'm going to leave it up there for a second. So the speaker you're going to meet in a few minutes took this oath. And he lost some things in his life because of it, but he also gained some really great perspective that he wants to share with you. And that's why we have him today to discuss the Constitution and what it means to him. So in a few minutes, I'm going to introduce to you Brandon Rumbaugh, but he asked that I first, sorry, the microphone's on. He asked that I first play a short video of introduction. Once you see his 4-minute video, we'll welcome him to the stage, and he'll begin his presentation.
Well, when I first met him, it was, here's a young man that has no legs, and at first, I didn't really know what to say to him, and we just talked. We started talking about sports and the Marine Corps, the military, and I could tell he was a little down. But as we grew tighter, I kind of told him, hey, you have a story to tell. We kind of sat down and I kind of told him, look, don't feel sorry for yourself. I know it's probably, I can't even imagine what you're going through, but go out and tell your story. Talk about perseverance and resiliency. And he started doing that. And today, he seems like a rock star, and I couldn't be prouder because he decided that enough is enough, quit milking around, and let's get, I'm here, I got a story to tell, let's go tell it. And I couldn't be more prouder than an individual from a standpoint of a close friend of mine that has come a long way just through his speaking.
How would I describe Brandon? Patriot for all patriots. I met Brandon a little over 2 years ago when I had reached out to him after learning that 22 veterans a day commit suicide. I had gone to my CrossFit coach and owner of CrossFit Uniontown and asked him to participate in a WOD to end veteran suicide. That is workout of the day at a CrossFit gym. When he agreed, I had reached out to Brandon to ask him to come speak, and he didn't hesitate.
The first time I heard Brandon speak was when he was living homeless for that month, and the first thing I noticed was that I was blown away by what he had said. Everything that he said was very heartfelt. He just was an amazing person. Everything that he says really hits you deep, and I've heard him speak many, many times, and it's sort of the same thing. I think I cried the first time that I heard him, and I still get tears in my eyes every time I hear him speak.
The things I take home with me in my heart are his sincerity and his actual caring for not only himself, but more for the people that don't have what he has. And his humility, once again, is just, it stands with you. Every day is a gift, and we're given that. You don't ever quit, and you can actually touch other people with the problems that you've been given in your life and help them. He goes out, and that's the least, you know, it's the first thing you might notice, but it's not what Brandon's about.
I know it's hard what you're going through, but the old saying is when you get knocked down, you gotta get back up. You gotta keep going.
Don't change who you are, because who you are is what makes you a good person, and to just be better every single day, and to take what you hear from Brandon and to use it and apply it in your life.
Uniontown's not too far from here, so we're actually walking on one of Pittsburgh's own, and it is my extreme honor to introduce you to Mr. Brandon Rumbaugh, ladies and gentlemen.
Hopefully you guys didn't see that. I almost fell. That's one of the things I fear every time I come up onto a stage like this. But I'm honored to be here. Today is a very special day, not only for me, but for everybody in our country. When you think about the Constitution, you really don't think about exactly what it stands for. You know, the Bill of Rights, all the amendments, you know, our First Amendment, the freedom of speech, and all the things that it entails that allows us to really do everything that we do every single day of our life. And I don't think we do a good enough job as a country to really educate everybody on what that exactly means. And when I decided to join the Marine Corps, you know, this had a lot to do with the path that I went in my life. And to be honest, when I think about, you know, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, you know, how our government started, I thought about, you know, how can I contribute? You know, is that going to be with, you know, graduating high school, going to college, you know, getting a job, supporting my family? Or was it going to be, you know, going to the military? Whenever I grew up, you know, I didn't have a lot of things in my life. You know, my parents weren't wealthy. You know, I can remember, you know, from the time I was, you know, 15 years old growing up, we didn't even have a vehicle the whole time I was growing up. And I knew that at some point in my life, things were going to change, not only for me, but for my family and my family's name. I actually ended up moving out of my parents' house when I was 15 years old. So I moved moved about an hour away, and decided, you know what, I'm going to start over from here. And I'm going to do everything that I can to make sure that I lead a successful life. you guys don't mind, I'm gonna switch to this other mic here. Good, you guys hear me? I don't like being behind a podium. I'd rather walk around and you know, keep moving. But whenever I turned 15 years old, I said, you know what, enough is enough, and I want to take control of my life right now. And mind you, I just turned 28 years old this year, so that wasn't that long ago. So I moved away from my parents, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with Waynesburg, Pennsylvania. Any of you here from Waynesburg? Good, you guys know exactly what it's like. So I moved down there by myself, ended up moving in with a friend, and finished high school there. When I graduated, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. I knew the military was an option. I also thought college was an option. And I didn't really have an understanding of, you know, financial aid, FAFSA, all that good stuff. And I thought to myself, you know what, I don't even have $1 to my name, how am I gonna pay for college? So I said, you know what, I'm gonna go into the Marine Corps. In November of 2007, I decided to join the Marines, went to boot camp, and I had no idea what to expect. Anybody in here serve? So some of you know what it's like, and thank you for your service. But I got to Parris Island, and I got off the bus, and the first thing that happened, a drill instructor comes running over and tells me to throw my stuff on the ground and to get on the yellow footprints. So I'm standing there, and I'm thinking, this is the biggest mistake I ever made in my life. I don't want to be here, I want to go home. For the next 3 months, we went through boot camp, and every single day of our lives was scripted from the time we got up to the time we went to bed. Woke up at 4:30 in the morning, went to sleep at 8 o'clock in the evening. Every single day was the exact same. And some of the things that we had to do while we were there. So we wake up in the morning, and there's 2 lines on either side of the squad bay that we were sleeping in. One line here, one line on the other side, we're all facing each other. We're standing there in shorts and a t-shirt and some flip-flops. Throw that stuff off. Next thing we start with our socks. Our drill instructor says, hey, put your left sock on. Put your right sock on. Take your left sock off. Take your right sock off. Put your right sock back on. Put your left sock back on. Put your pants on. Oh, you didn't do it fast enough. Take your pants off. And the whole time I'm thinking, this guy must really, really hate his life. Because he's making us get dressed and undressed 100 times before we even start our day. And I didn't really understand, what the concept of that was. And you fast forward, 4 years later, 3 years later, whenever I'm in Afghanistan, and suddenly it all hits me. It was about taking orders. It was about doing something when you're told to do it without hesitation. Because when you're in a combat situation, if you hesitate, people are gonna die. I know that sounds, kind of harsh. You're probably thinking, how can I apply that to my life? Well, you can apply that to school, to your career. Your teacher might have or your professor might have a syllabus for you, and it shows all the things that you're required to do. Well, why can't you go above and beyond that and do twice as what's on that syllabus? I know you guys don't want to do that, you're college students, but it will pay off later, especially in your career. If you want to stay in a 9-to-5 job for the rest of your life, and do the same thing Monday through Friday, then do exactly what is asked of you. Don't do anything else. If that's the life that you want to live, then that's great. If you want to do something great, then do more than what is asked of you. Do more than what is on that schedule. Don't work just 9 to 5. Work 8 to 10. So as we move forward from boot camp, which really wasn't that tough physically, it was more mental, just like colleges. So we got through there and ended up going to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, where I graduated from ITB, which is Infantry Training Battalion, and I became an 0341, which is a mortarman. Any of you know what a mortar is? Yeah, some of you guys, it's a big tube, sticks in the ground, you drop a round in it, shoots in the air, blows up, and kills a bunch of bad guys, which is very effective in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I graduated from ITB, and then I went to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and that is where I spent the next 3 years of my life, before I ended up getting hurt. I got there, and I was a new guy, and once again, everything started all over again, just like in boot camp. They had us doing ridiculous things every single day, sweeping the dirt. And that they would wake us up at 11 o'clock at night just when we think we're about to go to sleep, and they would say, hey, go out in the yard and start sweeping the grass, there's stuff in it. Doesn't make any sense, once again. But there's a reason for it, like I said earlier. So fast forward again, about a year later, and we're told that we're going to be slated to go to Iraq. And at this point, the war in Iraq was pretty much over. We didn't know that. We weren't sure what to expect whenever we got there. So we get to Iraq in 2009. March of 2009 was right after my birthday. So we're there. We actually went to Al-Assad, Iraq, which is where Saddam's base was. And we get there, and we have a swimming pool, we have a Burger King, a Cinnabon, we had a gym. Not exactly what you'd expect for a deployment to Iraq. My deployment in Iraq was actually a lot nicer than living in the home that I live in now. We had everything. We had more there than you could even imagine. So we're there for about 7 months, and we return home. And I really start to second guess why I joined the Marine Corps. I joined the Marine Corps to make a difference, to have a purpose. And I felt like we just wasted 7 months and millions of dollars of taxpayers' money to do absolutely nothing. And that was the mindset that I had. And I felt like it wasn't fair, not only to us, but to everybody else. So we're home for about 3 or 4 months. We get a new group of young Marines that come in. Our older Marines leave, and I get promoted to a corporal, and I end up becoming a squad leader and a section leader. So I had about 10 or 15 Marines that I was responsible for the next 2 years of their career. About 3 months after we're home, they tell us, hey, you guys aren't going to go to Iraq this time. We're going to send you to Afghanistan. We're trying to have a large presence in Afghanistan. We're sending over close to 100,000 Marines and soldiers, sailors, and Air Force. And they told us, that last deployment that you had is going to be nothing compared to what you guys are going to go through in the next 9 months. So we started training every single day. Wake up at 4:30 in the morning, just to give you a little run through of what our day was like for this Afghanistan deployment. Wake up at 4:30 in the morning. We meet at 5 a.m. We start running at 5:30. We usually run 10 to 15 miles every morning. Come back, shower, change, eat breakfast. When we were done eating breakfast, we would come back to our barracks and we would meet again, go run another 5 or 6 miles right before lunch, come back, eat lunch. After lunch, we would go do some weight training, and then we would come back, eat dinner, go to sleep, and wake up and do it all over again for the next 9 months. It's probably the best shape I was ever in my life. I was running 3 miles in just around 18 minutes. I was able to do 40 pull-ups, was bench pressing close to 400 pounds. And I felt like I was really ready for this deployment that was coming up. I felt like we had our guys trained. I felt like everything was in place for us to be successful on this deployment. Nobody was going to get hurt, nobody was going to lose their life. So September of 2010 comes around, and we're about a week away from getting on a plane and heading over to Afghanistan. Saying our goodbyes. I just celebrated my 21st birthday earlier in that year, and we get on a plane and we fly over to Afghanistan. We get to a base, Camp Leatherneck. I don't know if any of you have ever been there. It's a very, very large base over in Afghanistan. It's where everybody comes in, and then you go from there to the base in the areas in Afghanistan that you're going to be. So we end up spending about 5 days there, get on a helicopter with all of our stuff, and they fly us into Helmand Province, which is in the southern part of Afghanistan. It's where most of the Marines worked out of. And we're in Ospreys. It's like a half plane, half helicopter. They're horrible, they crash all the time. I don't know why we still use them. But we fly over this little village, and we start asking each other, hey, is this where we're going? We don't see a base. And all of a sudden, they land, open up the gate, they say, hey guys, run that way about 5 kilometers. You'll see a base that is being built. You guys might have to finish it. We don't really have a lot of information for you. So I'm thinking this is already starting horribly. We get up there, and the unit that we're relieving, they've been there for about a month, and They wanted to go home so bad. They were so happy to see us. They hated the area. They had lost a ton of guys. They didn't want to see anybody else get hurt or die. They were just happy that we were there. So the first 2 weeks we were there, we're ripping with them and learning the area, learning what our responsibilities are going to be, and then they leave. A week later, we were getting shot at from this building every single day at the same time. 2 guys would pop out, little holes in the building, shoot at us, and then run away. Finally, you know what? We said we had enough of it. We called it an airstrike, blew up the building. We knew that everything was destroyed because we could see it. The building was about 300 or 400 meters away. But sure enough, they wanted us to go check it out. And we're thinking, there's nothing left of this building. What do you want us to check out? There's nothing there. It's just a pile of dirt. There's nothing. They said, well, we want you to go check it out. So we go down, myself and 7 other Marines. I have my platoon sergeant with me. And the platoon sergeant is the highest ranking enlisted guy in the platoon. He's really in control of everything. We have a platoon sergeant and a platoon commander. But he's been in the Marine Corps for about 20 years at this time. He comes out with us. We're on a patrol, and I'm the 3rd guy in the patrol. He's the 4th guy, right in the middle. We go and check out the building. We see everything that we needed to see, and we start our patrol back to the base. And it was starting to get dark, and the last thing you want to do is be outside in Afghanistan in the dark, not on your base. So we took a shortcut, which we never should have done, but it was his decision to do that. So we actually cut the patrol in half and went a different direction than what we came, which is not a good thing to do. Considering we didn't cover that area, we had no idea if there were any IEDs, which is, an IED is an improvised explosive device. It's basically, a mine in the ground that they would bury. You step on it and it blows up. So we start walking back and we come down this narrow corridor. There's walls on each side, all dirt, and we're kind of in a rush. So I step through, there's like a doorway, step through that, and I continue down this corridor. And as soon as I made my second step, my platoon sergeant was directly behind me. He steps, and an IED explodes. I end up getting, blown through the wall, and I was knocked unconscious for about 2 minutes, and I wake up, and I'm trying to understand what happened. I thought that I had just stepped on an IED, but both my legs were still there. I stood up, and I went back out to the inside of the wall that I had just been blown through. And my platoon sergeant, Staff Sergeant Silva, he's laying in a hole that's about 6 feet deep. And he's still awake, he's talking to us. He had actually had his right leg amputated above the knee. His stomach was, completely open. He could barely see, he had shrapnel on his face, bleeding everywhere. And this was the first time in my life I had ever experienced anything like this. So on the inside, I'm freaking out just like anybody else would be. I'm thinking, is he gonna die? Is there another IED? What are we gonna do? And then the training kicks in, and I jump right on him, put a tourniquet on his leg, start talking to him, keep him awake, call for a medevac. The medevac's about 45 minutes away, which, is kind of ridiculous. Should only took him 10 minutes to get here. It took him almost an hour. So I'm thinking the whole time, if I don't do exactly what I need to do, he's gonna die. His daughter's not gonna have a father anymore. His wife is not gonna have a husband anymore, and we're not gonna have a platoon sergeant anymore. And more importantly, he's not gonna have a life to live anymore. So I knew that it was all on me. So I'm talking to him, I'm working on him, we stopped the bleeding, and we had to get him away from the blast site. The helicopter was gonna land about 200 meters from where we were. Now, funny story, you guys can laugh about this, because I kind of throw stuff in there every once in a while. Don't feel like you're being mean if you laugh. I feel like you're supposed to laugh, go ahead and laugh. But before I'd gotten hurt, I was actually a lot shorter. The good thing about not having your legs is you can be as tall as you want. So one of the biggest things I wanted to be growing up was right around 6 feet tall. And I was actually 5'3" when I was in high school. You guys can make fun of me, I know it's short. So here I am in Afghanistan, 5'3", 145 pounds. I have about 100 pounds of gear on, and I have a man that just got his leg blown off. He's about to die. With all his gear on, it's like 6'4", 250. I'm thinking there's no way I can move this man with all my gear on. So So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take all my gear off. I'm going to throw my rifle down. I'm going to throw him on my back, and I'm going to carry him to the helicopter. And everybody said, you know what? You don't want to do that. What if we start getting shot at? And then you take a round through the chest. You don't have any body armor on. Or what if you take a round to the head? You don't have any Kevlar on. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? This needs to be done. I need to be the person that's going to do it. So if I get hurt, that's on me, but we need to get him to the helicopter. So I throw all my gear off, I throw him on my back, and I sprint to the helicopter to throw him on. Throw him on the helicopter, and they take off, and we were almost positive that he was going to die, he wasn't going to make it. So mind you, I'm standing next to the vehicle, and I'm just leaning on this vehicle, thinking about everything that had just happened. I mean, I've never seen anything like this before in my life. Covered in blood, we had tan camouflage uniforms, looked like they were red. He had really just bled all over me. I'm just standing there thinking about, we still have 6.5 months left here. If it happened to him, it's going to happen to me, it's going to happen to anybody else in our platoon. He's been in the Marine Corps for 20 plus years, and it still got him. So why can't it get me? That's when I realized the situation that we were in. I realized how dangerous it was. I realized that, you know what, there's a good chance that I'm probably not going to come home, and I need to make peace with that right now if I'm going to be able to do my job effectively. I'm going to be able to avenge all the men and women that we lost on September 11th. I'm going to be able to avenge all the men and women that have been killed in Iraq or Afghanistan prior to me coming there. And then I thought about everybody that was back home, and I thought about all the men and women that would love to be in a situation that I'm in right now, but they can't because of, medical problems that they had, or they couldn't get in the military for some reason, or their parents talked them out of it. And I started to think about how I'm here for a reason. I need to figure out what that reason is. And that's when I realized it. My job is to not only help these people in Afghanistan that I have no idea who they are, but also to keep the men that I'm with here alive, and to also keep everybody back home safe. And it sounds kind of crazy to think that I felt like that was my responsibility, but if we had 100,000 men and women over in Afghanistan that thought that same exact thing that I was thinking, we really could have made a huge difference over there, and I feel like we did. So for the next 3 months, we would go on patrols, finding IEDs, getting shot at, just your typical day in Afghanistan. In those 3 months, we found upwards of 90 IEDs up until the day that I'd gotten hurt. So we were finding about one a day, and they ranged anywhere from 8 pounds to 300 pounds. Ones that were meant for a person to step on, ones that were meant for a vehicle. So anywhere from 8 to 15 pounds. They weren't meant to kill you. They were meant to dismember you and keep you alive. And they thought that that was way worse than actually killing you, because they felt like if you gave your life for your country, that's the biggest thing, the biggest thing you could ever do. So they felt that by putting these IEDs in the ground and us losing limbs, losing legs, losing arms, that it was much worse than actually killing us. So fast forward to November 29th, 2010. We had moved into a village. There was a house that the Taliban were living in. We had found it. That they were living in this house. There was probably 10 or 15 of them. We ended up evicting them because they stopped paying rent. You guys got that, good. So we kicked them out, and we set up a temporary base inside of this house. He said, you know what, if we're going to have an impact to be able to keep these people safe in this village, we need to have a 24-hour presence here. So we're running patrols out of this house. I'd just gotten back from a patrol with my guys, and I sent out a group of 4 Marines. And in that group was one of my junior Marines, Lance Corporal Chavis, 19 years old. The reason I sent them out is sometimes when we were sleeping at night, Taliban would come up and they would throw grenades over the walls, and it's never a good idea when you wake up in your sleeping bag and there's a grenade right next to you. You gotta throw it back. So we wanted to stop that from happening. So I sent them out, and I'm debriefing my guys on the patrol that we had just had, and we hear an explosion. At this point, we know what it is. I'd either been the guy in front of or the guy behind somebody stepping on an IED in 4 other instances up to this point. Already had gotten a Purple Heart for getting blown up the first time, and to be honest, I probably could have went home if I wanted to. But Earlier in the deployment, one of my friends actually ended up getting shot in the forearm and didn't tell anybody that he had gotten shot. He literally wrapped his arm up and hid it as long as he could because he didn't want to go home. So he had a bullet that went right through his forearm, covered it up. Sure enough, he ends up getting an infection, almost dies, and we had to send him home. So there's a type of guys that I was serving with. So I knew that I had to stay here as long as I could. So we hear the explosion, comes over the radio, Lance Corporal Chavis just stepped on an IED, took both of his legs above the knees, we need a medevac. So I get on the radio, call for a medevac, they're 15 minutes out, throw on my gear, grab a stretcher, a couple guys, and we run down to where he was. He's inside of a courtyard with one entrance and one exit. And immediately when I looked at that, I realized, you know what, they did this for a reason. He stepped on this IED, there's gonna be 10 more IEDs in here. They're hoping that, they can get more of us. So as that's going through my mind, I'm thinking, you know what? I really don't have to be the one to go in here and get him. I can send one of my other guys in, and hopefully they don't get hurt. And then I started to think about the type of person that I am, the type of person that I wanted to continue to be. And I realized, you know what, I already thought about that. So if I send somebody else in and they get hurt or lose their life, that's on me, and I'll never be able to live with that for the rest of my life. It's time for me to be a leader and to lead from the front and not to tell people just to do things and stand back and watch it happen. So I grab a stretcher and I'm walking in towards him and I take my first step and nothing happens. And I'm thinking, thank God. I take my second step, nothing happens. Then I take that third step and immediately it explodes. I go deaf, can't hear anything. Flew up in the air, looked up, saw the sky, looked down, or looked up, saw the sky, rolled, saw the ground, and then realized that I just stepped on an IED and did a backflip, stuff you see in the movies. It actually did happen. It was pretty cool at the time. Now that I'm alive, I can say that. So, I'm laying there, and I'm still conscious. It's the only thing that's really hard is it's tough to breathe and it's tough to see. I had a bunch of shrapnel in my face and my eyes, collapsed both of my lungs. And I try to stand up, and I can't get up. And I look down, left leg gone below the knee, right leg, it's still there. It's amputated now up to the hip, but my right leg was still there, but the toes were actually facing the other direction. And I started to think, like, that's not supposed to be that way, what's wrong? And then, the one thing that really should have killed me, my femoral artery had been cut. And there was literally blood, just squirting out of my body. And I'm thinking I maybe have a minute, 2 minutes to live if somebody doesn't take care of this. So they come over, my buddy, he's a corpsman in the Navy. He actually got a Silver Star for saving my life that day, which is, one of the highest awards that the military can give you. He takes his hand and he puts it literally inside of my groin and finds that femoral artery and holds it with his hand so that I stop bleeding. They then put a tourniquet on my left leg, which is now amputated just below the knee. And they're talking to me. And I can tell just by the way that they're talking that they think that I'm gonna die. I mean, I should have died, but I started to think about everything that I had done in my life up to this point. And I couldn't figure or find anything that was significant. And I thought, you know what, this is what I'm gonna be remembered for. Graduating high school and going to the Marine Corps, which is great, but I wanted to do a lot more with my life. And I told myself that if I make it through this, the rest of my life, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to be a better person every single day. Make sure that my life is not just about me. Make sure it's about the people that are around me, people I don't even know. How can I affect complete strangers? How can I make somebody realize that life is worth living for? Sure enough, they're carrying me to the helicopter. One of my friends, Sergeant Skipper, was on the front end of the stretcher. So there's 4 guys, 2 in the front, 2 in the back. And he's not the most coordinated person in the world. So he's walking backwards, the other guys are walking forward, and he trips and falls. I roll off the stretcher, start rolling down the hill. He pretends like nothing ever happened. He thinks that I'm dead at this point, so he thinks, you know what, I'll just run down there and grab him and put him on the stretcher real quick. Well, I was still awake, and I remember that. So, whenever I'm having a bad day, he's out of the Marine Corps now. He's married, has 3 kids. He's a little bit older, 35, 36. So, I know he goes to bed every night at 9 in the morning, gets gets up at 3 or 4 for work. So if I have a bad day, which we all have bad days, if you say you never had a bad day, you're lying. Whenever I have a bad day, I think about that time in Afghanistan, and I think, you know what, at least I didn't drop one of my best friends when he was about dead. I'll call him. I'll wait until like 12 o'clock, 1 in the morning, and I'll say, hey, he'll answer the phone, hey, what's going on, everything okay, thinking that something's wrong. And I'll pause for a second, and I'll say, hey, remember that time when we were in Afghanistan? He'll be like, yeah, what time are you talking about? I'll be like, that time that I was dead and you dropped me and we're gonna leave me there? He starts crying. I hang up the phone. He probably doesn't sleep for another week or 2. And I'm good. So they put me on the helicopter, and I had already, as soon as I got hurt, I grabbed my med kit that I had on my flak, and I ran an IV in my arm so that, if I made it to the helicopter, they could just hook me up. So I get on the helicopter, and I pass out immediately. They gave me, a bunch of, painkillers, antibiotics, stuff like that. When I woke up, I was back in the United States. It was about 2 weeks later. I was in Washington, D.C. at Walter Reed. But from that point, I went from where I'd gotten hurt to a hospital in Afghanistan, to a hospital in Germany, and then back to the U.S. Not knowing until about a month ago, I actually went back to Afghanistan last month for 2 weeks. So I went back to the area where I'd gotten hurt. I went to the bases around there, and I spoke to all the men and women that are over there. When I went there, I went to the hospital. And surprisingly, one of the nurses that took care of me was on rotation again when I went back last month. And I walked through the door, and she starts crying. And I'm like, why is this random lady crying? Am I that ugly? And she looks at me and she goes, you don't remember me, do you? And I said, I don't even remember being here. And she goes, oh yeah, that's right. Whenever you got here, you were dead. Like you had no pulse. Like we thought that you weren't gonna make it. She told me that I actually arrived there dead. They brought me back to life and kept me there for 24 hours, then sent me to Germany, and they still didn't think that I was gonna make it. Then I spent another 10 or 12 days in Germany and then flew back to the United States. So fast forward, 5 years later, I'm still learning new things about, something that happened, something that almost took my life. I'm still learning new things about it. So I toured this hospital, and I got to see, x-rays, got to meet with the nurse. I got to see exactly how everything happened. And it was more of an experience for me rather than the men and women that are over there, because my job was to go over there and motivate them and let them know that they still have a purpose and that the job that they're doing is for everybody that's back home. But really what it did was give me closure and allow me to forget about that part of my life and realize that it might sound like it's something negative to everybody else. A lot of people say, I can't imagine going through what you went through. But honestly, I wouldn't take any of it back, because it was the biggest eye-opener for me that I've ever had in my life. It showed me how selfish I was prior to this happening. It showed me that, in fact, I thought that I was working hard. I was not working hard at all. It showed me that I was capable of so much more in my life. And it sucks that it took losing both of my legs to see that. But I think we all have moments in our life that show us that. Something traumatic happens. I'm not the only one in this room who's been through something traumatic. I promise you that. But sometimes we need those horrible things or those traumatic things to happen to us in order to motivate us and to drive us. And whenever that happens, you need to hold on to that and use it to push you every single day in your life. Especially in this area, because our area is not known for being super, super successful. We're not, there's not a ton of money here. It's tough to make it in this area, as we all know it. So anything that you can hold on to drive you, what I tell people is you need to find, your why. Whatever that why is, you need to find it and you need to express it and you need to talk about it, whether it's, your family, whether it's, if you want to grow up one day and just have a ton of money, that's perfectly fine. It's your life. If that's what's going to motivate you, then use that to motivate you. But the sooner you find that why, the easier it's going to be. And for me, the why that I found was because I wanted to be that one person that everybody looks to for whatever it is that they're going on in their life. I wanted to be that person that, I'm at the gym one day and somebody else comes in, and this has happened 1,000 times already. They'll come up to me and they'll say, hey, I saw you in the gym last week. I wasn't going to come at all this week. I was about to give it up, and then I saw you in here. And I looked at myself and I said, if he's in here doing it, why can't I be doing it? Similar to my situation. When I got back to Walter Reed in Washington, D.C., when I woke up after I got off that plane, I thought that my life was over. 21 years old, no legs, I'm going to have somebody take care of me for the rest of my life, never going to have a real job, never going to have a career, never going to get married, never going to have kids, never going to be able to do anything. That's immediately what I thought for the next 7 months of my life. And it was the worst time I've ever had. People probably hated me. I remember my sister, she was 16 years old at the time. She walks into the ICU to see me, and the first thing I say to her whenever she walks in, I said, if you're going to start crying, I don't want you here. I mean, that's the type of person that I was. I didn't want to be around anybody. I didn't want to deal with it. And sure enough, I woke up one day, 7 months later, after seeing some of the men and women that were there. Yes, men and women. We had a lot of women that were with us that had lost one leg or two legs. So there were a lot of us there. And I met a couple people. I met a guy, his name is John Peck. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of him. He lost both legs and both arms. So this guy lost both legs and both arms in an IED explosion. And he's getting up every morning at 6 in the morning and going to therapy, trying to better himself. All I did was lose 2 legs. I still got both of my arms. I can still be independent. Why am I whining and complaining about the fact that I don't have feet anymore? So I look at the positive side. I never have to run again. That's great. Never have to lift legs. Never have to do squats. And just some of the other guys that I met there. Guys that lost 2 legs and an arm. I mean, could you imagine? Like, you guys probably look at me and be like, you know what? I couldn't imagine living life without legs. But you know what? I'm looking at these people and I'm thinking, I could not imagine living life without having my hands. I mean, just think about that for a second. Imagine if you didn't have either your hands, or you're missing even one hand. How difficult your life would be. Yet these guys are missing legs and arms, and they're doing more work than any of us are doing right now. I mean, it should make you feel pretty bad about yourself. I mean, it made me feel bad about myself. It made me want to do everything that I possibly could. And what it showed me was that, we need to have goals. And it also showed me that I finally realized that I don't care how far I make it in my life. I don't care if I graduate with 5 degrees, a master's, a PhD. I don't care if I'm the CEO of 10 companies. I will never, ever, ever be content with where I'm at in my life. Ever. The second you're content, the second you're done. I mean, it's great. Go to college, yes, graduate. But you know what? Go to graduate school. All right, you went to graduate, get your doctorate. All right, that's great. You have a private practice. You're a doctor. You have a private practice, and you're volunteering at a hospital. That's great. Volunteer at 2 hospitals. There's always more that you can do. I promise you. And we're at a time right now where anything is possible. You're going to tell me that you have certain restrictions because of how you were raised or where you came from or how much money your parents had. I'm going to call you out on it because I grew up with absolutely nothing. I didn't have a vehicle growing up. Neither of my parents had a car growing up the whole time I was with them. We moved around all the time. I can remember not having food in the house. I mean, I'm not the only person that went through this stuff, but you hear so often people complaining about certain restrictions that they might have. And really what it comes down to, the restrictions are inside of that person, inside of their mind. And the fact that they don't know what it takes to put in the work, to be successful. And what does it mean to be successful? Well, it means a lot of different things. It's not just about how much money you make, I promise you that. It's about how much you give back, how caring you are, what you can do for other people, knowing that what you're doing might not do anything for you. That's what it's really about. And once I found that in my life, everything else fell into place. I've learned that if you focus on the work and not the money will come. The second you start focusing on the money, the work starts to not be what it should be. And then the money's not going to come. So if you apply this stuff to every single aspect of your life, I promise you there's nowhere that you won't be able to go. So for the next 2 years, I lived at this hospital, right around 19 months. So I lived in a hospital bed, people taking care of me. And once I got to the point to where I could, stand up and walk and do all those things, they said, you know what, we're going to retire you from the Marine Corps. So I retired at 23 years old, a double amputee, so I was given a retirement, which is great. I didn't have to focus on finding a new career right away. So I had that time to figure out what I wanted to do. So I left the hospital in June of 2013, and I moved back to Western PA. Anybody know where Uniontown's from? Anybody from Bay County? Yeah, so you guys know exactly where Uniontown's at. So I moved back to Uniontown, and I ended up renting a house right on Pittsburgh Street. It was like a 4-bedroom house with just me, but it was the only thing that was available. So I decided to enroll at Penn State. There's Penn State Fayette, which was 10 minutes from my house, and I have about 15 credits left there before I graduate with my bachelor's in business, marketing, and management. After that, we're going to move on to an MBA in entrepreneurship. But I moved back and started going to school, and that's when the rest of my life started to unfold and how I got to this point. So I met an organization, it's about the Warrior Foundation. They reached out to me, asked if I needed any help. I said, you know what, I don't really even know what that means. I don't know what you guys can do for me, but I really don't need anything right now. So I met with the founder, and he said, you know what, you have a story, you need to tell it. People need to hear this. So I started speaking at schools, daycares. I mean, I spoke to kids that were 4 years old, probably had no idea what I was talking about. But you know what? I got in front of them because they've never seen somebody like me. And I wanted them to understand that it was okay that if they saw somebody like me out in Walmart, that they could come up to me and ask questions, because they need to know what happened. They need to know that it's okay to go out of their comfort zone. Kids come up to me all the time, and they'll look at me a little bit. And I've had kids get down and they'll look up to see if there's a leg in there, and they're like, where are your legs at? And then I try to explain it to them in a way that they can understand it. And I know from that point on, they're going to want to learn more. And we're not going to have some of these issues that we've been having. So after I met Steve Montleone, founder of IATW, he asked me to come on board. So this is about 2 years later. He said, hey, we want you to be on the board of directors. So I accepted that position, and I took over the financial grant program. So our foundation started in Butler, but we're a tri-state area veteran nonprofit. So it's Western PA, Eastern Ohio, Northern West Virginia. So I took over the financial grant program. So I was doing that in school at the same time and speaking whenever I could. So basically, veterans, you don't have to be combat, you don't have to be wounded, just as long as you served honorably. After or during 9/11, you can apply for a grant, and I'll look at your finances, see why you need help with this, and I'll approve or deny it, and then send a check up to $1,000 directly to the bank, the mortgage company, so on. And my role with them started to grow, and I ended up having a house built for me, an organization called Homes for Our Troops. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. They build fully accessible houses for severely wounded veterans. They called me one day and they were like, hey, we want to build you a house. You don't have to give us anything for it. Just let us come in and build it. And I said, nobody builds somebody a house for nothing. Quit calling me. They kept calling me back. And they were like, listen, come up to Boston and meet us, and we can explain this to you. So I said, all right. So I flew up to Boston, and they explained everything to me. I literally picked out the cabinets, the style of the house, everything. And fast forward a year and a half later, and I now live in a fully accessible house. It's right around 4,000 square foot. And I could be 100% independent in this house for the rest of my life. And I don't have a mortgage. I'm laying in bed one night, and I'm thinking about how I feel so selfish for allowing this to happen. And I don't feel like anybody owed me anything because I volunteered. What about those men and women that got drafted in Vietnam? They got absolutely nothing when they came home. We turned our backs on them as a country and didn't provide any type of support for them. So I started to think, I need to do something. If I'm going to stay in this house for the rest of my life and not pay for it, I need to do something. I started thinking about all the men and women that are veterans that are homeless. And then on top of that, all the other people that aren't veterans that are homeless. And we have a lot of them in this area. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go downtown Uniontown. I'm going to live homeless in Uniontown for 30 days to raise awareness for these people. And hopefully people in the community will recognize that it's a big issue. So I left my house October 29th, right before winter started, and I went down to Five Corners in Uniontown. and I slept at the base of a statue on the ground, a little cot and a sleeping bag that somebody brought me for the next 30 days. Didn't have any money, didn't have a phone, didn't have anything, and I had no idea what to expect. But I just knew that something had to be done, and I knew that I could use what had happened to me to raise awareness for this. Sure enough, after it was done, we had right around 10, 11,000 people from all over the country come and visit. We never asked for money, but people made donations. We ended up raising $30,000 in donations that we donated to a veteran shelter here in Pittsburgh called A Veterans Place. If you guys don't know about it, you should look them up. And more importantly, what it did was bring the community together. At that point, there was so much stuff going on with election, race, what church you went to, how much money you made, especially in Uniontown where we're from. One of the big things I wanted to accomplish was show everybody that it doesn't matter how much money you have, it doesn't matter the color of your skin, it doesn't matter what church you went to, it doesn't matter where you went to school. If we had a simple goal in front of us, we all could work together to achieve that goal. And what it did was bring everybody in the community together, and it showed them that, you know what, all this stuff that's going on is a lot bigger than us, and we need to put some of this stuff aside and actually work together. And we proved that it was able to be done. So after we did that, I ended up deciding, you know what, I need to open up a couple offices in Uniontown, and off of that, we were opening up a mental health private practice because a lot of people, go through these traumatic experiences. They need somebody to talk to, and we needed something like that in Uniontown. So that's, really where, where we're at right now. And before I finish up, what I want to do is just, thank all of you for being here today. I know that the majority of you that are here, it wasn't mandatory for you to be here. So, good on you for coming and allowing me to share my story. We're going to open it up for some questions right when I get finished. But what I want to do is just read one last thing for you. This is an award citation that was written by my platoon commander after I'd gotten hurt. It was for an award that I received. But I just want to be able to paint a better picture for you as to what was going on in Afghanistan. So let me read that real quick, and then whenever we get finished, we'll open it up to as many questions you guys have. If you want to stay here till next week, I'll stay here all week with you. So this was written by my platoon commander, Captain Rain, and he retired also after this. So I'm just going to run through this real quick, and then we'll finish up. Any questions? Corporal Rumbaugh's leadership and courage in the face of the enemy were force multipliers and were reflected in his junior Marine's professionalism and conduct. Corporal Rumbaugh's initiative and enthusiasm surpassed that of his peers in all aspects of his billet as first fire team leader in the mortar platoon. He made a tremendous impact on the platoon that continued after his medical evacuation from the battlefield. On November 21st, 2010, Corporal Rumbaugh carried a mortar along with several rounds on a reconnaissance mission in the village of Mosulmani. His patrol was ambushed by enemy fighters firing heavy machine guns from a building ranging from 700 to 900 meters away. Corporal Rumbaugh fired the mortar in a handheld mode, requiring only one adjustment round before striking the target. His accurate fire resulted in the enemy's regress and allowed Marines from his squad that were pinned down to maneuver to cover. Corporal Rumbaugh's squad was then moved to an extract point in order to link up with the QRF in a nearby wadi. As fire from multiple enemy positions ranging from 800 meters to the west, he instinctively moved away from the vehicle's protection while under heavy enemy fire to establish a mortar firing position and repel the enemy's attack. His quick and aggressive action stunned the enemy and allowed the Marines to organize an effective counterattack. Corporal Rumbaugh's ability to make quick decisions led to the destruction of 3 Taliban fighters attempting to fire on a friendly unit on 27 November 2010. While another squad was receiving fire, Corporal Rumbaugh's squad maneuvered from the south in order to cut off the enemy's regress. Recognizing a good overwatch position near the probable enemy's egress route, Corporal Rumbaugh maneuvered his fire team to a building rooftop and was successful in observation engagement and enemy fighters, resulting in 3 more enemy KIA. On 29 November, an element of Corporal Rumbaugh's section struck an IED approximately 500 meters from his patrol, Corporal Rumbaugh, with complete disregard for his own personal safety, immediately ran to the scene of the strike. While attempting to carry the casualty out of the danger area, Corporal Rumbaugh struck a secondary IED, resulting in the loss of both of his legs. Although he was grievously wounded and close to death, Corporal Rumbaugh was worried about the Marines near him than he was about his own injuries. Corporal Rumbaugh's success as a fire team leader and the positive impact he had on his Marines was a major factor in the platoon's success. His courage and selfless nature stand as an example for the entire platoon to emulate. He consistently sacrificed his own safety to help his fellow Marines. Corporal Rumbaugh stands as a testament of the legacy of combat Marines throughout history. Thank you, guys. Any questions?
Check. If we have any questions, I'm going to bring the microphone around to you so people can hear it, and we'll be able to make sure the entire audience hears the question. Please stand up. Ask your question.
I just want to know how you feel about Kaepernick.
Oh, so, that stuff, I really don't get involved with it. You know what, he has his own, right to do whatever it is that he feels like he's doing. To me, it didn't make sense, because when I think about the flag, I think about, like, military. I don't think about all the other stuff that's going on. So I just didn't really understand it. I feel like, he has a right to do whatever he wants, and it's definitely, I know what he's like, the message he's trying to get across, but I feel like he should have been trying to do it in a different way. I don't know why, but kneeling for the flag, to me, it doesn't feel like that makes a huge impact. It more like caused, things to be worse. Like, I felt like he should have been out in the community, or doing more of the press conferences that he was doing, talking about the situations that he was going through and why he felt like he needed to take a stand. I feel like that would have been more effective and more impactful. It didn't upset me. It did make me mad. I don't know why, but I just felt like there was more he could have been doing.
Another question here.
First things first, thank you for coming and speaking to us today, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
My question was, the man you were attempting to get out, did they successfully extract him?
Yeah, so Staff Sergeant Silva, he made it back to Walter Reed. He made a full recovery, and Lance Corporal Chavis ended up losing both of his legs above the knees, and he was at the hospital right around like 3 or 4 years, but made a full recovery as well. He got married and has a couple kids now.
Another question over here.
Hello. I'd just like to say thank you for serving, thank you for being a Marine, and thank you for your service to our country. As a daughter of a Vietnam veteran, I would actually like to know, what are your thoughts on the VA healthcare system and how they do actually treat our current veterans and our former veterans that are either in service, going to be out of service, or in heartbreak?
Yeah, good question. So, my situation is a lot differently. I walk into the VA, they see that I'm missing both of my legs, so obviously I'm going to get treatment that is different than somebody else that has those internal injuries. I feel like the VA doesn't do a good enough job of attacking the issues right away. Everything is a process. So if you have somebody that has PTSD or they're having severe depression, it could take a month or two before they actually see somebody and get the services that they need. We need something that is more immediate action. And the way that we can do that is to allow the VA for veterans to see somebody of their preference until the VA can see them. Because I know 1,000 doctors that if you called them and said, hey, I got a veteran that really needs to see somebody, he or she would see them the next day, rather than waiting a month for the VA to see them. There just needs to be some type of alternative. I don't think the VA is necessarily horrible, but I think that they make it more about processes than care for the veterans. Which it comes down to money. That's what it all comes down to.
Other questions? Okay.
So you said that you left your parents at the age of 15. Are you still in contact with them?
Yeah, so, I still talk to my parents, and it wasn't, I just felt like I was like able to do so much more, and I didn't see them actually doing it themselves. You know, we didn't have any money, we didn't have anything. So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, obviously one job isn't cutting it. Why not get a second job? Why not get a third job? And I just knew that if I stayed in that mindset and that mentality and stayed in the situation that I was in, I was going to go down that path. And I just felt like it was time for me to get out and do my own thing. And it was probably one of the best decisions I made besides joining the Marine Corps.
Brandon, thank you so much again for coming.
Thank you.
Question I have for you is, during that 7-month very challenging period that you talked about, was there any particular thing that turned you around and got you off the mat and more motivated? Or was it just time? What was it that...
So, someone came in and they brought something to, someone came in to visit me. It was, I remember it 100%. So President Obama came in and saw me. It was the second time he came and saw me. We were hanging out talking about like Sports Center. He loves talking about sports. Huge sports fan. So we were talking about sports, and another visitor came in right after him. I can't remember exactly who it was, but they set something right next to my bed, and it was like a frame with a quote in it. And I don't know why, but I immediately, everything clicked for me after I read it, and it said, "Find something you would die for and live for it," which, I don't know why, it just made so much sense to me at the time, and I said, you know what, that's exactly what I'm going to do, and I just applied it. I mean, it started with, you know, small things, just, you know, waking up at a certain time every day, not sleeping in until 1 o'clock. Just applying it in every single day of life and holding myself accountable 7 days a week in every single thing that I was doing. Once I was able to do that, everything else just fell into place.